The gradient rises at 2.1% for 11.5 miles. That is not a dramatic figure on paper, but in the mountains of West Virginia in 1918, with a loaded coal consist stretching back half a mile behind the locomotive, it was a number that broke machines. Double heading, banking engines, the constant expensive choreography of brute force applied at enormous cost because no single locomotive had the adhesive weight to hold a full train on that grade and keep it moving. That was the situation on the Deepwater Division of the Virginian Railway between the town of Elmore and Clark's Gap. 14 miles, the first 2.5 at 0.5%, then 11.5 at 2.07. Wheel slip, stalled trains, tonnage left behind. The Virginian Railway had been built for one purpose: to move Appalachian coal from the West Virginia mountains to the coast at Norfolk. Its entire engineering rationale depended on the ability to transit that grade at tonnage the traffic demanded. In 1918, the American Locomotive Company, ALCO, delivered the answer. It arrived in pieces. The Virginian Railway was the creation of two men: Henry Rogers, a Standard Oil executive who supplied the capital, and William Page, who surveyed a route through terrain that every other engineer had declared impractical. The line opened in 1909 and covered fewer than 500 miles. Its entire reason for existing was coal, but the grade at Elmore was the operational problem that defined the railway's cost structure. Everything that moved over it had to move slowly, expensively, and with assistance. The Virginian had tried large, articulated types before. The 2882 had served on the gradient. So had the 0880 compound. They were powerful machines. They were not powerful enough. What ALCO proposed in 1918 was unlike anything that had been built before, or has been built since. A 2-10-10-2, 20 driving wheels, 2 sets of 10, the largest compound mallet articulated locomotive ever constructed. Before we go further, if this kind of railway history matters to you, consider subscribing to the channel. Every video here is built around the locomotives and railway systems that the standard histories overlooked, the machines that outperformed their celebrated counterparts, the engineering decisions that were ahead of their time, and the railway lines that shaped nations without receiving the recognition they deserved. If that is the kind of documentary worth watching to you, the subscribe button is how you tell us, and we want to hear from you. Did you work on the railways? As a driver, a fireman, a fitter, a signalman, a track engineer? Did a parent or grandparent spend their career on a railway that is no longer operating, on a locomotive class that is no longer preserved, or in a workshop that is no longer standing? Leave it in the comments. The people who actually operated these machines know things that do not appear in any published railway history. We want to hear from them. Now, back to the locomotive. The Class AE was a true compound mallet, 2 engine units under a single boiler, the rear unit rigidly attached to the frame, the front unit either hinged, free to swing through curves, 20 driving wheels, 4 cylinders. The high-pressure cylinders at the rear were 30 inches in bore by 32 in stroke. Steam from the boiler entered there first. After expansion, that exhaust steam passed forward through flexible pipes to the front engine unit, where it entered cylinders 48 inches in diameter. 48 inches. Those low-pressure cylinders were the largest fitted to any locomotive in the United States. Each one contained a volume of nearly 34 cubic feet. They were so large that Alco's engineers had to tilt them slightly upward on their mounts, simply to provide clearance against the running gear beneath them. The boiler itself was the widest ever placed on a steam locomotive. Contemporary technical records place its maximum diameter at close to 10 feet at the rear tube sheet. To avoid the proportional problems of an excessively long boiler, Alco designed it wide, short in length for its power class, enormous in diameter. That engineering decision was deliberate. A longer boiler would have made the turntable problem insurmountable. The calculated tractive effort in compound operation was 147,200 pounds force. In simple mode, when live steam was routed directly to all 4 cylinders for maximum starting effort, that figure rose to 176,600 pounds. For comparison, the Union Pacific Big Boy, which the public regards as the definitive heavy articulated locomotive, produced approximately 135,000 pounds tractive effort. The Class AE was stronger. Nobody has made a documentary about it. But here is the engineering fact that defines this locomotive class more precisely than any specification figure. When Alco completed the first Class AE at its Schenectady works in April 1918, the locomotive was too wide to travel the American rail network in assembled form. Its overall width was 12 feet, 144 inches. Bridges, tunnels, station platforms along the route south to Virginia could not accommodate it, so it departed Schenectady in pieces. The cab was removed. The front low-pressure cylinders were unbolted, photographed for reassembly reference, and loaded onto a separate gondola car ahead of the locomotive body. The sand and steam domes came off. The machine moved south in a condition it was never designed to occupy. Incomplete, stripped back to the minimum that a flat car could carry. At the Virginians' shops, it was reassembled, but the turntable problem remained. The locomotive, even with its deliberate proportions, with its wide diameter boiler kept shorter than its power class demanded, was too long for the Virginians' existing turntable infrastructure. There was no question of building new turntables. The engineering answer was instead applied at the other end, the tender. The AE class tenders were ordered short, unusually, deliberately, functionally short. Short enough that locomotive plus tender, as a combined unit, would reach a turntable at all. The Virginian later pioneered the use of auxiliary tenders, extra water and coal cars attached behind the primary tender, precisely because the main tender's capacity had been sacrificed to the demands of infrastructure that predated the machine it was now attached to. The locomotive was so large that the railway had to compromise on fuel range before the first mile was run. In December 1921, James Partington, estimating engineer at Alco, delivered a paper to the American Society of Mechanical Engineers. In it, he documented what the Class AE had actually done on the Virginian: 1 locomotive, 110 cars, 17,250 tons, over a ruling adverse grade of 0.2%, from Princeton, West Virginia, to Norfolk, Virginia. The locomotive did not stall. Another run, 15,725 tons from Princeton to Roanoke. Coal consumption, 26.9 pounds per 1,000 ton miles. That efficiency figure was not matched by many locomotives of greater fame. The AE operated at the grade at 8 miles per hour. That was its designed speed for maximum load. At 8 miles per hour on a 2% grade with that tonnage in tow, the boiler could sustain pressure across the full working day. The engineering team had proportioned it correctly, but in 1941, locomotive number 800 exploded, a boiler failure. The blast killed all 3 members of the crew, an engineer, a fireman, and a head brakeman who was reported to be 1 week short of his 27th birthday. The investigation continued. The survivors of the class kept working. The AE locomotives ran on the Virginian into the early 1950s. They had served as pushers at Elmore until the railway electrified that section. They moved then to other grades, other assignments, other coal drags across the Appalachian system. They were modified only once to accept Worthington feedwater heaters. Otherwise they ran as delivered. 30 years of service without fundamental change. The last Class AE locomotive was withdrawn from Virginian railway service in 1952. The scrapping of the class was completed before any railway preservation movement had the organization or resources to intervene. None survive. There is no Class AE in any museum, no example on static display, no preserved example in any collection, anywhere. The wheel arrangement, 2-10-10-2, has never been replicated. In the entire history of the steam locomotive, only 20 were built, 10 for the Santa Fe, which converted them back within 7 years, and 10 for the Virginian, which operated them for 30. The Union Pacific Big Boy is preserved. 8 examples. It is displayed, celebrated, documented. The public knows its name. And the Class AE produced more tractive effort than the Big Boy. It was built 7 years earlier. It did precisely the work it was designed for, without significant modification, for 3 decades. Its boiler was the widest ever fitted to a steam locomotive. Its cylinders were the largest ever used in American service. Its tenders were shortened to fit turntables, built before it existed, and the railway it served pioneered the auxiliary tender system, specifically because the AE's own tender could not carry enough range for the demands of its coal drag assignments. The engineering record is unambiguous. What the Virginian's Class AE did, on that grade, with those loads, over those years, is in the operational documents. It is in the records of Alco and the railway mechanical engineer. It is in the memory of the men who stood in that cab and opened the regulator at the foot of the Elmore grade. It is not in the general histories. That is what this channel intends to correct. If this is the kind of railway history you want to keep watching, subscribe to the channel. There are more locomotives, more railway systems, and more engineering achievements still to document. And if you have a connection to what you just watched, a family member who drove this class, worked in the workshops that maintained it, or operated on the railway that deployed it, tell us in the comments. What did they drive? Which railway, which depot, which line? The people who operated these machines are not in the standard histories, but the engineering record depends on what they remember. We want to hear from them.